The room was not meant for anything special. It was just a small hall with old wooden chairs lined up in uneven rows. The walls carried faint marks of time, places where paint had faded or chipped away. A single upright piano rested near the front, its surface dull from years of use. The air felt quiet but not important, the kind of place people passed through without remembering much about it later. She stood near the back of the room, waiting. No one paid much attention to her. She blended in easily, wearing simple clothes, her hair tied back in a way that suggested she did not want it in her face. She was not nervous, but she was not eager either. She simply waited, hands resting loosely by her side, eyes calm. A few people moved around the room, talking softly. Some were organizers, others were guests who had come to watch a small demonstration. This was not a concert. There were no bright lights, no stage, no sense of excitement. It was more like a test, something routine, the kind of thing people do just to fill time. Someone near the piano flipped through a thin stack of papers. Another person checked their phone. A few chairs creaked as people settled into their seats. No one seemed to expect much from what was about to happen. She was there because someone had told her to come, not because she demanded attention or asked for a chance. She had simply agreed when invited. It was easier that way. She had learned long ago not to explain herself unless asked. One of the organizers finally looked up and noticed her standing there. The person gestured toward the piano with a relaxed motion, as if offering a seat on a bus. "Go ahead," they said. "Just play something simple." The words were not unkind, but they carried little weight. Simple meant easy. Simple meant short. Simple meant nothing impressive. It was clear they were not expecting much, and they were comfortable with that. She nodded once. No smile, no sign of pride or fear, just acceptance. As she walked toward the piano, a few people glanced at her briefly, then looked away. No one leaned forward. No one straightened their posture. To them, she was just another person sitting down to play a tune they would forget by the end of the day. She sat on the bench and adjusted it slightly. The sound of wood scraping softly against the floor echoed more than expected. It caught a few ears, but only for a moment. Her hands hovered over the keys. She did not rush. She did not sigh or stretch her fingers dramatically. She simply placed them where they belonged, as if the piano was an old friend she had visited many times before. The room felt still, but not focused. Someone coughed. A chair shifted. A phone buzzed quietly and was quickly silenced. She looked down at the keys. They were worn, some more than others. The white keys were no longer truly white. The black keys had lost their shine. This piano had been played by many people, most of them practicing, some struggling, some quitting halfway through. She took a slow breath. The first notes came gently. They were exactly what had been asked for. A simple melody, clean, clear, and soft. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just a familiar tune that most people had heard before, even if they could not name it. A few heads lifted slightly, not in surprise, but in acknowledgement. Yes, she could play. That was all. One person tapped their foot without thinking. Another leaned back in their chair. Someone near the side whispered something to the person next to them, then stopped. She continued playing the melody as it was meant to be played. No rush, no added notes, no effort to impress. Each key was pressed with care, each sound placed gently into the room. Her face showed little emotion, not because she felt nothing, but because she felt no need to show it. Her eyes stayed on the keys, following the pattern as naturally as breathing. To the listeners, it sounded nice, pleasant, that was all. The kind of sound you hear while waiting for something else to happen. One of the organizers nodded slightly, as if confirming a thought. This is fine, their expression seemed to say. This will do. They had already decided how this would go. She would play the simple melody. They would thank her. Then they would move on to the next thing on their list. But as she continued, something quiet but unusual began to settle in the room. Not excitement, not shock. Attention. It happened slowly. So slowly that no one noticed the exact moment it began. The melody remained simple, but the way it was played felt different. There was control in her hands, a steadiness that made the notes feel connected, not separate. Each sound seemed to know where it was going next. A person in the front row stopped tapping their foot. Someone else lifted their head fully now, eyes resting on her hands. She did not change the tune. She did not speed up or slow down. Yet the room felt quieter than before, as if people were listening without realizing they had chosen to. Her posture was relaxed, but precise. She sat straight, shoulders loose, wrists flexible. The movement of her fingers was smooth, not rushed, not stiff. There was no struggle in her playing. It was clear she was comfortable. That comfort carried a quiet message, though no one spoke it out loud. This was not new to her still. No one expected anything more. The request had been simple, and she was honoring it. The melody continued, calm and familiar, floating gently through the small hall. In that moment, she was not trying to prove anything. She was not thinking about the people watching her. She was simply playing, and that, without anyone realizing it yet, was exactly what made the room begin to change. By the time the melody reached its final notes, most eyes were now on the piano. The distractions had faded. Phones stayed still. Whispers stopped. The last note lingered softly in the air, then disappeared for a brief second. No one spoke. It was not because they were amazed. Not yet. It was because something felt unfinished, and she knew it too. Her hands rested on the keys, not lifting right away. She remained still, eyes down, breathing steady. She had played exactly what they asked for, nothing more, nothing less. And no one in that room yet understood that this was only the beginning. The silence after the last note felt heavier than anyone expected. It was not awkward, but it was not comfortable either. It was the kind of pause that made people hesitate, unsure of what came next. A few seconds passed before someone cleared their throat softly. One of the organizers leaned forward a little. They had been ready to speak, ready to say thank you and move on. But something held them back. The simple melody had ended, yet the feeling it left behind did not fade as quickly as it should have. She still had her hands resting on the keys. Her fingers were relaxed, not tense. Her shoulders remained loose. She did not look up. She was listening, not to the room, but to something inside herself. Someone in the second row shifted in their seat. Another person crossed their arms, eyes still fixed on the piano. A few exchanged quiet glances, as if they were all thinking the same thing but unsure how to say it. Then, without asking for permission and without drawing attention to herself, she began to play again. At first, it sounded like a continuation of the same simple tune. The opening notes felt familiar, safe. Anyone listening would have thought she was just repeating the melody, maybe adding a soft ending. But then something changed. The notes began to stretch slightly, not in length, but in feeling. The melody breathed in a new way. It was still simple, still gentle, but now it carried more weight. Each note seemed to lean into the next, as if telling a quiet story. The room responded without anyone realizing it. Someone leaned forward, elbows resting on their knees. Another person uncrossed their arms. A phone that had been resting on a lap was slowly lowered and forgotten. She did not look at the audience. She did not need to. Her eyes followed the keys as her hands moved with calm confidence. There was no rush, no show, no effort to impress. The music unfolded naturally, like a thought spoken clearly for the first time. The melody began to grow, not louder, but deeper. New notes appeared, soft harmonies sliding in beside the main tune. They were not flashy. They were careful, thoughtful, almost shy. A quiet breath escaped from someone near the back of the room. This was no longer background sound. This was something people were listening to. She had not changed her posture. She had not lifted her head. Yet her presence felt stronger now, as if the piano and the room were connected through her hands. The music moved gently, like a memory returning piece by piece. It carried warmth, but also something else. A hint of longing, a sense of distance. It felt personal, even though no one knew why. One listener swallowed hard, surprised by a sudden tight feeling in their chest. They did not understand where it came from. The music had not become dramatic. It had not turned loud or fast. And yet it touched something familiar. She continued, letting the melody guide her instead of controlling it. Her fingers moved smoothly, pressing keys with just enough force. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was rushed. The piano, old and worn, responded in a way it had not in years. The dull keys carried warmth. The uneven sound added character instead of distraction. It was as if the instrument itself was relieved to finally be heard this way. A person near the front closed their eyes. Another rested their chin on their hand, completely still. The organizer who had first spoken now sat back, hands folded, their earlier confidence replaced by quiet focus. They were no longer thinking about schedules or lists. They were listening. The melody shifted again, gently stepping into unfamiliar territory. It was no longer something most people recognized, yet it felt strangely known, like a place seen in a dream. Her expression remained calm, but there was emotion in her hands. Each note carried intention, not effort. But honesty. Time seemed to slow. No one checked the clock. No one whispered. Even the small sounds of the room faded away. The music filled the space between the chairs, the walls, the people. It did not demand attention, but it held it firmly. Someone felt their eyes sting slightly and blinked, embarrassed by the reaction. They were not sad. They were not happy either. They were simply moved. She allowed a small pause between phrases, letting the notes settle before continuing. Those quiet moments were just as powerful as the sound. They gave the listener space to feel. The melody rose gently, then fell back into something softer. It felt like a conversation, like someone speaking from the heart without raising their voice. For the first time, she lifted her gaze slightly, not to look at the people, but to look beyond the piano, toward the empty space ahead. Her eyes were focused, distant, as if she was seeing something only she could see. The music followed that gaze. It became richer now, layers forming naturally. Still simple, still clean, but undeniably deeper. The kind of sound that made people forget where they were. A listener near the aisle slowly sat up straight, as if waking from a light sleep. Another pressed their lips together, nodding faintly, not in approval, but in understanding. This was no longer a test. It was no longer a request. It was an invitation into her world. She played with steady control, but there was freedom in it too. The notes flowed, not trapped by rules or expectations. She trusted the music, and it trusted her. The piano sang under her hands, each key responding faithfully. The worn bench, the faded walls, the plain room, all of it disappeared. There was only the sound, and the people listening were no longer thinking about who she was or why she was there. They were simply listening. As the piece moved toward a softer section, the energy in the room shifted again. It became tender, fragile. The melody felt like it was holding something precious. Someone took a slow breath, careful not to disturb the moment. Another listener felt a strange sense of gratitude, though they could not explain why. She leaned slightly into the piano now, not from effort, but from connection. Her fingers danced lightly, barely touching the keys at times, then pressing deeper when needed. The sound faded gently, then returned, like waves reaching the shore. The music did not end. It paused. Her hands hovered, allowing the last notes to settle fully before continuing. The silence felt alive, full instead of empty, and in that quiet space, everyone understood something without words. This was not planned. This was not practiced for them. This was real. She resumed, guiding the melody into something new once more. The room remained still, breath held, hearts open. No one knew how long she had been playing. No one wanted it to stop. And somewhere deep inside, even those who had expected nothing now felt a growing sense of wonder. They had asked for something simple. They were no longer prepared for what was coming next. The music continued to move forward, but it no longer felt like a simple melody at all. It felt alive. Each note seemed to carry meaning, as if it had a reason to exist beyond sound. The room remained quiet, not because anyone was told to be silent, but because no one wanted to break what was happening. She played with steady hands, yet there was something new now, a sense of direction. The melody no longer wandered. It knew where it was going. People began to feel it in different ways. Some felt a warmth spread slowly through their chest. Others felt a gentle pressure behind their eyes. A few felt their thoughts drift away, replaced by images they did not expect. One listener remembered sitting alone late at night, hearing music through a thin wall. Another remembered a long walk taken years ago, with no destination and no rush. The memories were not clear, but the feelings were. She did not know what each person was feeling. She was not trying to reach them one by one. She was simply being honest with the sound, letting it speak for her. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence. Sometimes they stayed close together. Sometimes they spread wide across the keys. The motion was smooth, practiced, but not mechanical. It was natural, like speaking in a familiar language. The piano answered her touch fully now. Notes rang out with clarity, then softened gently when needed. Even the small imperfections of the instrument seemed to fit the moment, adding texture instead of distraction. Someone near the back leaned against the wall, arms loose at their sides, eyes fixed on her hands. Another person near the aisle slowly nodded, not to a beat, but to the feeling itself. The melody rose, not suddenly, but with patience. It grew stronger, fuller, like a thought becoming clear after a long pause. The sound filled the room, reaching the corners, touching every chair. She remained calm, breathing evenly, shoulders relaxed. There was no sign of strain, no sign of fear, just presence. The music shifted again, this time into something brighter, Not happy exactly, but hopeful. The notes felt open, like light passing through a window. A listener smiled without realizing it. Another let out a quiet breath they had been holding. The organizers, once so casual, now sat completely still. Their earlier expectations had faded. They were no longer thinking about what should happen next. They were fully here. She allowed the music to slow for a moment, creating space. The pause did not feel empty. It felt full of anticipation. Then she continued. The melody returned, but transformed. Familiar, yet deeper, stronger. It carried layers now, one sound resting gently on another. The harmony wrapped around the tune, giving it weight and emotion. This was no longer something that could be explained easily. It was not about skill alone. It was about feeling, about truth, about something shared without words. One person felt their throat tighten, surprised by the reaction. Another pressed their hands together, fingers interlaced, as if holding on to the moment. She leaned slightly forward now, closer to the keys. Her eyes followed her hands, but her focus seemed far away, as if she was listening to something beyond the room. The sound grew richer, more confident. It carried strength without becoming loud, power without force. Time seemed to stretch. No one could say how long she had been playing. Minutes felt like seconds. Seconds felt like something outside of time. The music reached a turning point. The melody climbed higher, notes stacking gently, building tension. The room felt it. Hearts beat a little faster. Breath became shallow. She held that tension carefully, never rushing it. She trusted it. Then, slowly, she released it. The sound softened, flowing back into something gentle and reflective. It felt like standing still after a long journey. Looking back without regret, a listener wiped at their eye quietly, hoping no one noticed. Another closed their eyes again, this time not out of focus, but out of connection. The piano seemed to whisper now, the notes barely touching the air. Yet every sound carried weight. Every pause mattered. She played with restraint, choosing each note with care. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was extra. The room felt different than before, warmer, closer, as if everyone shared something private. Someone near the front realized they were holding their breath and slowly let it out. The melody shifted once more, this time into something unexpected. A subtle change, but enough to be felt. It carried strength, resolve, and quiet confidence. This was the sound of someone who knew who they were. Her hands moved faster now, but still controlled. The notes flowed smoothly, each one landing exactly where it should. The piano responded with clarity, filling the room with rich sound. A listener's heart began to race, not from excitement, but from awe. This was no longer just music. It was a story. It spoke of struggle without pain, of hope without noise, of strength without pride. She lifted her head fully now, eyes open, gaze steady, not searching the room, not seeking approval, simply present. The music swelled again, reaching its strongest point so far. The sound wrapped around the listeners, holding them firmly but gently. Someone near the aisle felt the chill run through their arms. Another felt warmth spread across their back. The moment felt important, though no one could say why. She guided the melody forward with purpose. This was no longer an exploration. It was a statement. The piano sang under her hands, every note clear, confident, alive. The room was completely still now. Even the smallest movements had stopped. The music slowed once more, easing into something calm and steady. The tension melted away, replaced by peace. Her hands softened, touch lighter, sound gentler. The final notes of this section lingered, hanging in the air like a question not yet answered. She did not stop. Instead, she allowed the silence to breathe. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Ready, everyone felt it. Something bigger was coming. They did not know what it would be, but they knew, without doubt, that they were witnessing something rare. And they were no longer just listening. They were waiting. The silence before the next notes felt almost loud. It pressed gently against everyone in the room, wrapping around them like a held breath. No one moved. No one shifted in their seat. Even the smallest sounds seemed afraid to appear. She remained still, fingers hovering above the keys, eyes calm and focused. Her face showed no tension, no rush. She waited, not for permission, but for the right moment. Then she played. The first note came softly, lower than before. It carried weight, like a step taken with purpose. Another note followed, then another, each one deep and steady. The melody was no longer light or wandering. It was grounded. The room felt it immediately. This was different. The sound filled the space in a new way, reaching deeper, settling into places the earlier music had only touched lightly. It felt strong, confident, and sure of itself. She leaned into the piano just slightly, not from effort, but from connection. Her hands moved with clear intent now. Every note mattered. Every pause carried meaning. The melody began to grow, not by becoming louder, but by becoming fuller. Rich harmonies formed naturally, wrapping around the main tune. The sound felt complete, like something that had been waiting to be heard. Someone in the front row slowly straightened their back, eyes wide, breath shallow. Another person pressed a hand to their chest, surprised by the sudden rush of feeling. The piano responded beautifully, its worn keys producing sound that was warm and full. The small imperfections only added depth, giving the music a raw honesty. She played with confidence now, but never with pride. There was no showing off, no extra movement, just truth, flowing through her hands into the room. The melody climbed higher, stronger. The notes stacked carefully, building tension again, but this time it felt intentional, controlled. She guided it with patience, never rushing the moment. The listeners felt it rising. Hearts beat faster, breath caught in throats. She held the tension for just the right amount of time. Then she released it. The sound opened wide, like a door swinging open after years of being closed. The music expanded, filling the room completely. It felt powerful, emotional, and free. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere in the room. Someone near the back whispered without meaning to, then covered their mouth. This was no longer just a performance. This was a revelation. The melody surged forward, confident and bold. Her fingers moved faster now, but still controlled, still precise. The sound was rich and layered, carrying emotion without chaos. People felt it in their bodies now. A warmth in the chest, a tightening in the stomach, a strange mix of joy and release. She lifted her head slightly, eyes open, gaze steady, not searching for approval, not acknowledging the reaction, just present, fully and completely. The piano seemed to sing under her hands, every key responding with clarity. The sound filled the room, bouncing softly off the walls, settling into every corner. Someone felt tears gather and did not try to stop them. Another smiled through the emotion, unsure why. The music spoke of strength, of resilience, of quiet battles fought and survived. It carried emotion without sadness, hope without loud celebration. She allowed the melody to soften for a moment, drawing the listeners closer instead of pushing them away. The sound became gentle, intimate, like a shared secret. The room leaned in with her. No one looked away. No one blinked. The piano whispered now, each note delicate and intentional. The silence between sounds felt just as important as the music itself. She played with restraint, trusting the power of simplicity even in this moment of depth. Then, slowly, the melody began to rise again. This time it felt triumphant, not loud. Not dramatic. But certain. The sound carried confidence, clarity, and peace. It felt like standing tall after a long journey, not needing to explain how you got there. A listener near the aisle felt a chill run down their arms. Another felt their chest expand, breath deep and full. The organizers sat frozen, expressions unreadable, minds completely empty of anything but the sound. She guided the music forward with steady hands, allowing it to grow to its fullest form. This was the heart of it, the place where everything came together. The piano rang with strength, the melody clear and bold. Every note landed exactly where it belonged. The room held the sound carefully, as if afraid it might break if touched. She reached the peak. The music swelled, filling the room with undeniable power. It was not overwhelming, but it was commanding. It demanded presence, not applause. For a brief moment, it felt as if time had stopped. Then, just as gently as she had built it, she began to let it go. The sound softened, slowing, releasing the tension piece by piece. The melody descended, calm and steady, like a deep breath after a storm. People felt relief wash over them, a sense of peace, a quiet understanding. She played slower now, her touch lighter, the sound warmer. Each note felt like a farewell, not sad, but complete. The room remained perfectly still. No one dared move. The final notes approached, and everyone felt it. The ending was near. She allowed the melody to settle into something soft and simple again, bringing it full circle. The sound returned to where it began, but it was no longer the same. It carried everything that had come before. Her fingers slowed. The notes grew quieter. The final sound lingered in the air, gentle and full, then slowly faded away. She lifted her hands from the keys. Silence filled the room. Not empty silence, complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The moment stretched, heavy with meaning. She remained seated, hands resting in her lap, Eyes lowered. She had said everything she needed to say. And the room knew it. They had asked for something simple. They had been given a masterpiece. But no one clapped yet, because everyone needed a moment to breathe. The silence stayed longer than anyone expected. It was thick, steady, and full. No one rushed to fill it. No one felt the need to move or speak. The music was gone, but its presence remained, hanging gently in the air. She stayed seated at the piano, hands resting calmly in her lap. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her breathing was slow and even. She did not look up right away. She did not search the room for reactions. She did not need them. One person finally shifted in their seat. The soft sound of wood against wood breaking the stillness just slightly. Another cleared their throat, then stopped, unsure if even that sound was too much. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. It was not loud, just a few careful claps, almost hesitant. Then another joined in, and another. Within seconds, the room filled with applause, not rushed, not wild. Deep, steady, and full of respect. People stood without realizing they were doing it. Chairs moved back. Hands came together again and again, not because they were told to, but because it felt like the only right response. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes moved across the room slowly, taking in the faces, the expressions, the shared emotion. There was no surprise in her gaze, only calm understanding. She stood from the bench and gave a small nod. No bow, no smile meant to impress, just gratitude. The applause continued, then slowly softened. People began to look at each other, some smiling, some still emotional, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Someone whispered, "I didn't expect that." Another replied quietly, "No one did." She stepped away from the piano, giving it one last gentle glance, as if thanking it too. Then she moved to the side of the room, giving space, as if the moment no longer belonged to her alone. An organizer approached, their earlier confidence replaced by humility. They opened their mouth to speak, then closed it again, unsure of what words could follow what had just happened. "Thank you," they finally said. The words sounded small, but sincere. She nodded once. "You're welcome," she replied softly. There was nothing more to add. People began to gather their things slowly, still wrapped in the feeling. Conversations were quiet, thoughtful. No one rushed toward the door. One person paused near her, clearly wanting to say something meaningful, then simply said, "That meant a lot." She smiled gently. "I'm glad," she said. Another person thanked her, then another. Each response was different, but the feeling behind them was the same. She listened, nodded, accepted their words without letting them lift her too high. Praise had never been what she played for. As the room slowly emptied, the piano stood alone again at the front, silent but changed. It felt as though it carried something new now, something shared. She waited until most people had left before picking up her bag. The organizer offered to walk her out, but she declined politely. She preferred to leave quietly. The hallway outside felt brighter than before, the air cooler. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked outside. The day continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. People talked. Life moved on. She stepped into it without hesitation. Later, people would talk about that moment. Some would describe it with excitement, others with calm reflection. Some would say it reminded them of something they had lost. Others would say it gave them hope. But everyone would agree on one thing: they would remember it. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was real. She returned to her normal life, to quiet mornings and long evenings, to moments of doubt and moments of peace. Nothing about her routine changed on the outside, but something had shifted inside. She knew now, more than ever, that her voice mattered, not because it amazed people, but because it connected them. And somewhere, in that small room, a few people carried that connection with them into their own lives. They would play music differently, listen more closely, pay more attention to the quiet moments. Some would tell others about a woman who was asked to play something simple and gave more than anyone expected, but they would never fully capture what it felt like to be there, because some things cannot be explained, they can only be felt. And she understood that. She did not need recognition. She did not need her name remembered. What mattered was that, for a brief moment, a group of strangers had been brought together by honesty and sound, and that was enough. As she walked away, the world felt a little quieter, a little kinder, and the echo of a simple melody, "Turn,"